think that it is not outside the bounds of the Department of Justice or other agencies to look at election security broadly in America. I think people need to know that their elections are secure up and down the food chain from, every election there's problems, there are issues, right? And so I think, listen, I think everyone should welcome, listen, I think everyone should welcome it.
That
let's have it over with.
Trump won in this election and suddenly there are no issues.
No, I think
I haven't heard him talk about a single problem.
No, I can tell you there are lots of problems in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania over the course of the night. And remaining up until Bob Casey conceded this week, you had Democratic elected county officials saying we're not going to follow the law, we're going to count ballots in opposition to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court.
They conceded the race.
But those elected officials in Bucks County said we're going to deny the law. We're going to oppose what the Supreme Court said.
Maybe they did that, but they still lost. They lost.
I understand, but my point is that people don't have. When the county commissioner who's elected sits there and says, I'm not going to follow the law, I don't care what the law says, we should investigate
One of the things about Trump's election lies is that he keeps describing it as election security, as you just did, when that's not at all what he is talking about. He is talking about ballots that were tampered with in Venezuela and all kinds of ridiculous things. Let's take the time machine back to February of 2023. This is a Washington Post story. Former President Donald Trump's 2020 campaign commissioned an outside research firm in a bid to prove electoral fraud claims, but never released the findings because the firm disputed many of his theories and could not offer any proof that he was the rightful winner of the election. That's according to 4 people familiar with the matter. Meanwhile, over at the Justice Department, this is what they're going to be potentially handed with. I want to start with Jack Smith's team, right? Because Jack Smith is already moving to basically dissolve this case against Trump because he cannot be prosecuted as president. He cannot be tried as president. Trump now wants to go further down into the ranks, career people who are supposed to have protections. Will he be able to do that?
Well, it'll be hard. I have worked in the federal government, and I've worked in the Department of Justice, and I have tried to fire people. It's not as easy as it looks. Now, there are alternatives here that are unpleasant. One is you transfer people to jobs that are so beneath them or inconvenient or unpleasant that they decide to leave of their own accord, which does not negate the idea that they could bring suit that they were put in that position
retaliation,
as retaliation.
Basically, yeah.
On the other hand, people may just decide to leave because of those atmospherics. But I mean, the cart is before the horse here, Abby. The idea is, if you want to bring in OPR, the Office of Professional Responsibility, and launch a legitimate investigation into whether their conduct was above or below board, and then take personnel actions, that's one thing. Firing them and saying, we're going to investigate it after, is a little upside down. So we'll have to see how it plays out.
Well, the idea, right, isn't necessarily getting to the bottom of the matter and making sure all these people are ethical and honest. The idea is retribution and making this team of professionals who showed up to do a job they were asked to do by their bosses, whether the boss is a Republican or a Democrat. That's what civil servants and professionals are trained to do. It puts that sense of public service not only under scrutiny, but makes it really unattractive for people who are
that's the
happy,
point.
happy to serve in a government regardless of their politics.
I think you have to look at this other wrinkle, which is one of the things that he started to do and ultimately didn't complete at the end of the last administration, the Trump administration, and has promised to do again, is this Schedule F employee initiative, which is to hire people who pass the loyalty test, not protected by civil service, easier to bring on, and more importantly in this model, easier to fire. So now basically you could have thousands of people who wouldn't be on the level of political appointees, not protected by civil service, but doing those jobs, who would basically be there only for their loyalty and their willingness to carry out instructions.
I get the Republicans' argument that you get to win, you get to pick the bosses, you get to pick who you fire. I understand that to a certain degree, but as I was working in races around the country, nobody said anything about what y'all are talking about or the reason why they were going to go vote. Democrats lost this election because of gas and groceries, other things that happened, but none of it was around making sure that the election was safe. None of this was around retribution, even though he talked about it in all the rallies, people thought, but the voters that I dealt with from New York to California, this is nuts. So I think this comes back to bite Republicans as it continues, because it will not stop here.
Well, it's about political capital, right? How much political capital the president has. When you start out, any administration has so much political capital. How you choose to expend that political capital is incumbent on the president. So if he does, as like Chuck says, if he spends it on getting people through that he really thinks can effectuate change, at the grocery store, the gas pump, putting in people like the new Secretary of the Treasury, other people who are really going to effectuate change and make things happen. That's one thing. If you're going to go chase ghosts and try to push people through who may not get confirmed by the Senate, you're going to burn a lot of political capital in the Senate. They believe they're an equal body. A partner. They've read the Constitution a lot, those senators.
There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people that got appointed tonight. I just want to make sure before I talk a lot of trash on you that you didn't get a job tonight, because there's like 15 of us before I got up here that got a job. I'm going to talk smack on you, but if you're going to be assistant FBI director, I don't want no part of it.
I don't know. I don't know. Listen.
You got news for us tonight?
No, listen. I was.
Go ahead.
I live in Arizona, so everybody talks about how we count votes. There was some very sensible election integrity pieces of legislation that got vetoed by our governor. That phrase, election integrity, has turned into a combative phrase. We all want elections to be quick and the votes counted quickly. We want it to be easy to vote and hard to cheat. And you can't even work on legislation right now. We had some good people in our county board of supervisors leave, Republicans leave, because of how they were treated over the 2020 election. Right. But the citizens in Arizona, the only place I disagree with you is that where we are, it takes so long for us to count in Maricopa County, and then everybody complains it takes so long, but they won't let the measures get through legislatively to fix it.
So, Mike, I'm curious about, you're in a state where Carrie Lake was, she was like the
number
queen
one election denier.
Right? Like there's Trump and then there's Carrie Lake, essentially. And she didn't win.
Right.
For a second time now in a row. How do you think real voters who maybe they actually did vote for Trump this time around and they didn't vote for him the last time around are going to see this effort to just stay on this issue that has already been settled?
Well, I think it's wait and see. Let's see what they actually do. The conjecture right now and what they're saying may happen. If he does it, I think there's going to be some pushback from some people saying, well, I thought they would have learned the lesson in 2022, that 2020 cost them 2022 was not cost effective for them with the way they fought about 2020. So if they do that again, they're going to have trouble coming up in 2026, I think.
What happened in Arizona is you had a whole lot of people that voted for Donald Trump and a guy named Ruben Gallego, because I worked on that race for 2 years. And I think that's the biggest difference, is you can't now say that there was some kind of thing going on at the top of the ticket, because in places like Michigan and in Wisconsin, the Senate candidates got less votes than Harris and still won, because people went into the ballot box and voted for Donald Trump and left.
To your point, Abby, and to Chuck's point earlier, what Donald Trump and the campaign did was amazing, right? They created this coalition of like working class white rural voters, black and brown working class voters in the cities, right? It was really truly masterful, right?
Don't make me admit none of that.
And those folks, right? Those folks are counting on what Chuck said. They want lower gas prices. They want, they feel inflation every day. And so to them, I think a lot of this stuff they're not really focused on that. They want to see what the results are. There's an incredible amount of pressure going to be on this administration to get costs down and get things going.
Urban, it sounds like you think it's a bad idea.
I think it's a waste of political capital.